If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories around fitness and self-improvement, which you can apply to your life today. For those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I'm your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. In today's episode, I'm going to be discussing fat loss and self-confidence. Two topics that kind of merge in. However, depending on whether you do need to lose fat or you just want to improve your self-confidence, this episode should be an excellent one for you. So we're going to start on the topic of losing body fat, because when anybody starts to exercise or they start to do any form of self-improvement, one of the first things they tend to look at is how they look, and what really dictates how we look is how much body fat we have. Because you'll have heard when people say, right, I want to lose weight, what they mean by that is they want to lose body fat. Now that may be you. So you may be in a situation where you have too much body fat. Maybe you're only carrying a little bit too much. You could be skinny fat. There could be loads of different things, okay? But it's a very good thing to understand how it works and how you can apply different things to your life to control your body fat levels. Because with our body fat levels, it really dictates so many things in our life. For example, when you think of every single health condition which reduces our life expectancy in the form of cancers or even diabetes, heart disease, which is the biggest killer of people in the UK today, they are all heavily dictated by our body fat levels. So if you know how to control yours, not only can you change the way you look, but you can change your body fat, your life expectancy and everything around that. So it really is, it's a really important tool to know. And how to understand it is super important, which we're going to be going over today in terms of this. Now, when it comes to fat loss, there's one undeniable truth, and that is that a calorie deficit is what causes fat loss. Okay, so for our bodies to get rid of body fat, we need to be in a deficit of calories. Now, to explain that, calories is a measurement of energy. Okay, a deficit is when you have a lack of something. So in this case, we don't have enough energy. What does our body do? Our body goes to our body fat stores, it breaks it down and uses it for energy. So when we're looking to lose body fat for whatever reason, we need to ensure that we're in a calorie deficit. So if you look at all diets, right, you look at the ketogenic diet, you look at any of these brands that try to sell you like Slimming World, all of these things will work because they place you in a calorie deficit. They just have different methods of doing that. What they usually do, and one way to spot something like this, is they'll always have an enemy. So in the sense of Slimming World, I believe they have their sins. The ketogenic diet isn't big on carbohydrates for a number of reasons. However, at the end of the day, if your goal is to lose body fat, then it all comes down to a calorie deficit. So all you need to do, the first thing you should do, is find a diet or a way of eating that places you in said deficit. So maybe that is a ketogenic diet and reducing carbohydrates. Personally, for me, I would never do that. I would feel rotten. I like pizza. I like cereal. I like rice. I like bread. I ain't cutting out carbs, right? And you could be in the same kind of bracket as me. One thing I do with all my clients, and I've done with the vast majority of my clients for a number of years now, is track calorie intake, okay, or calorie counting as some people will call it. Now, it's come under quite a bit of criticism lately. I don't know, you may have seen one of the Diary of a CEO episodes. One of the guys, I forget his name, Tim Spector, that's what it is. He discussed calorie counting and he was like, oh, it's a load of rubbish, it's this and that. But he didn't really give much evidence to back that up. Now, in the sense of why he said it wasn't a good thing, it's just because he said that it wasn't sustainable long term. Still does not dispute the fact that controlling our calorie intake is what's going to lead to fat loss. So if you can stick to tracking your calories for a consistent period of time, it's a great method, which most people actually can. So again, this is something I do with all my clients. Now, if you're somebody that has tracked their calories before, or you're somebody that wants to track their calories, you'll understand if you have done it before, it's not as simple as it seems, in the sense that you could be tracking your calories for weeks on end. You may not be losing weight. If you're not losing weight, it comes down to either you're not in much of a deficit or you're not tracking your calories correctly. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things you can do in the sense of helping that. So we see people doing cardio all the time, okay, in terms of when they're trying to lose fat. Now, do you need to do cardio to lose body fat? No, you don't. However, it is going to help, because what cardio does is it increases our energy expenditure, how many calories we burn. Now, the more calories we burn means that if we don't eat enough, that helps us create that calorie deficit. Okay, so that's all it is. It's a tool to help it. So when you're tracking your calorie intake, it doesn't mean that you should just necessarily go about and do nothing. Any efforts that you can do to help aid that are really going to help. And for example, cardio is one of them. But when we move on to one of the other problems with calorie tracking, it is the inconsistency. And what I mean by that is you may track your calories every week, but do you track it all week? Now, what I mean by that is a lot of people have 5 great days of tracking. And then at the weekend, they'll go out and they'll consume, maybe they'll drink alcohol, or they'll go out for dinner, they'll go out for lunch, and they just won't track. And then they'll weigh themselves on a Monday morning and think, oh, how come I didn't lose weight? I was good 5 days of the week. Now let's return to this calorie deficit that we spoke about. So let's say you're in a calorie deficit 5 days of the week. You've created this deficit of calories. Let's say throughout the 5 days, it's amounted to 2,500 calories of a deficit. So you're in a deficit 500 calories for the 5 days of the week. Now, if you go out on the weekend and you eat 2,500 calories over your maintenance level, which is very easily, you're not going to lose body fat. You're not going to notice a difference in the scale long term. So that's one of the most common problems I see with people trying to lose body fat. So when you are trying to lose body fat, again, the first things first is we need to create the calorie deficit. So once you've found this diet, whether it's tracking calories, any form of diet, that's your first thing you need to outline. The next 4 things I'm going to talk about is something I use with all of my clients. Okay, I call these the 4 pillars of health. So aside from your calorie intake, which is the first one, we need to control our calorie intake in order to lose weight. There's 3 others. One of them is resistance training regularly. So that's weight training. Now, the reason we would weight train regularly is because weight training stimulates muscle growth. And what happens when we grow more muscle, we tend to look better. But from a fat loss perspective, it aids fat loss, but it helps us maintain our metabolism throughout a fat loss phase. On top of that, there's so many health benefits to resistance training, but it's just going to make dieting easier. So rather than just smashing a ton of classes or whatever, or cardio, which it can help, it will help, make sure you're doing some form of weight training, because when you lose all the body fat and you look at yourself in the mirror, you're going to want muscle mass. Because one of the things people say to me is like, oh, I don't want to grow much muscle. You may not think you do, but you will. Because the body that most people want is that toned body. And people are like, oh, I want to tone. If you want to tone, what you want to do is lose body fat and gain muscle simultaneously, which is possible. That's what I do with most of my clients. It's something called body recomposition. But for that to take place, we need the first 2 pillars, which is to be in a calorie deficit. And the second one is to weight train regularly. Now, the third pillar of health falls on nicely, and that is eating sufficient protein. Okay, now protein is going to support that process in the sense that if we're consuming sufficient protein, we're going to build and maintain muscle. It's just as important to maintain muscle throughout the fat loss phase as it is to build it, because it becomes really difficult for us to build muscle when we start to lose weight. It is possible, but it becomes more difficult. So again, with your protein, there's one thing, like people are like, well, how do I know how much protein I need to eat? There is one very simple guideline, and that is that you consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 180 pounds, consume 180 grams of protein per day. Now that is quite a high estimate, but if you're weight training multiple times per week, if you're in a calorie deficit, it's enough, it's sufficient. However, you can get away with less. So there are different calculations online. You can find yours, but again, if you don't want to, go off that one, and it'll do well in helping you out with that. Now, we went over the 3 pillars. Next for the 4th. The 4th one is our sleep. We need to get good sleep consistently. Okay, now there's 2 important words I said there. I didn't just say get sleep, right? So good sleep, good quality sleep. There's a difference between sleeping 7 hours a night and having good quality sleep for 7 hours a night. Okay, so for us to have good sleep, we need to have something called good sleep hygiene. So you need to be sleeping in like a cool room. It needs to be dark. You need to make sure, and the reason we're doing these things is so we don't wake up throughout the night, because quite often what will happen is you might think you're getting 7 hours or 8 hours of sleep, but it's consistently broken up, which is mean you're not going to get into deep sleep. That's where you recover. That's where your memories form. That's a very important part of sleep, that REM sleep, what we want. So the 4 pillars, which we went over, is make sure we're in a calorie deficit, make sure we're weight training regularly, make sure we're consuming sufficient protein, and make sure we're getting good quality sleep consistently. Okay, so if your goal is to lose body fat, in fact, if you have any goal around that, make sure those are your 4 main focuses. If you wanted to gain muscle, you would follow the exact same principles, those 4 pillars, except you wouldn't be in a calorie deficit. you'd be in a calorie surplus, which is when you give your body more energy than it requires and it uses that excess calories to build muscle, and it will store some as body fat. But that is just one of the repercussions of optimizing muscle growth. You would put on a little bit of body fat. But again, 4 pillars there. Don't overcomplicate it. It's far too common for people when they're trying to lose body fat to pick a number of things. Those 4 things will get you 95% of the results that everybody else is getting it. So you do them consistently, you're well on your way to achieving sufficient fat loss in that one. Now, the next thing I want to lead on to is nicely actually, is developing confidence. So one of the main reasons why people want to lose body fat is to develop confidence. However, if you're somebody who's maybe happy with the amount of body fat levels they have, or maybe you're almost there, whatever, but you're still not confident, I'm going to talk about a few ways in which you can improve that, okay? Because throughout life, throughout our pursuit of constant improvement, if we aren't confident, we're not going to do these things that we really should be doing in life. These may be exciting things, but if your confidence isn't there, you won't go ahead, you won't take action, you won't do them. So confidence is essential in life, and I'm going to give you a few wee things that you can do to help that. So first of all, it's very important to understand what confidence actually is, and I'll give you a very brief definition, in the sense that to have confidence is to have faith in your own abilities and believe in yourself. Now, people often get ego confused with confidence. Ego is something else completely. It's essentially, unlike confidence, it's when it comes out of self-interest. It's based on other people's approval, whereas confidence is purely for you. It's confidence in your own abilities. That's a powerful thing indeed. When you're 100% confident in what you're doing, you can go through life and do anything, essentially. But for that to happen, you need that confidence. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about in terms of confidence is one of my favorite things, and it is fulfilling the small promises that you make to yourself. So what we often see is people will make these promises to themselves. They'll say, I'm going to start losing weight, or I'm going to go and do this, I'm going to go and do that. They make a million different promises, but they never fulfill them. Now, what we think is that, all right, well, that didn't affect me, whatever, but that builds up long term. Because what you're realizing is all these things that you keep telling yourself you're going to do, you never, ever do. So how do you expect to be a confident individual? So again, the first way to start becoming more confident is to start fulfilling those small promises. And I say small promises, fat loss is no small promise, losing weight is no small promise, but the countless promises you make to yourself, start fulfilling them. Don't be one of these people that says, not only to yourself, but to others, oh, I'm going to do this, I might do this. Commit to something, okay? Don't say you might do a million different things. If you want to become a confident individual, you will do that by picking something, saying you're going to do it, and then going and doing it. That is where the confidence comes from with that. Now, another one that ties in with that, and it is fulfilling these small promises, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, in the sense that people always promise themselves, like, see the amount of times I've heard people, they say, right, oh, I'm going to start running, I'm going to start going to the gym, all these things that are a little bit uncomfortable, but they never do them for that exact reason. They are uncomfortable. However, to become confident, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We think about someone like David Goggins, okay, who's, of course, if you know who he is, he's an incredibly fit guy. He's known as one of the most motivating people on this planet, one of the most disciplined people on this planet, and essentially one of the most confident people on this planet. Because you talk to that guy, you hear him talk, he's got so much conviction in his voice. Do you know why? Because he does uncomfortable things all the time. And that gives him confidence. When he says he's going to go out and do something, everybody knows he's going to do it. Because he doesn't lie to himself, and he gets uncomfortable every single day. Now, you don't need to be like David Goggins. You don't need to go out a 20-mile run every day. However, what you do need to do is things like working out when you don't want to, going to work when you don't want to. That is an uncomfortable feeling. Getting out of your bed early. I always say this is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, is when you wake up in the morning at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, you're so desperately tired. The easy thing to do is to put your head back in that pillow, hit snooze, and go to sleep. However, if you are the type of person that starts getting up on that first alarm, getting out of bed, then you become more confident because you start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So a really good one there. This one that I practice a lot. I like to make myself uncomfortable by cold showers is an easy one. We all have access to it. It's a horrible one, but we all have access to it. One thing I do is something called a high performance day. Now, I've been doing this for around 8 months now, and what I do is only once per week because it is quite difficult to fit into a time schedule, especially when you're wanting to get sufficient sleep. But what I do is I wake up at 4 a.m. Now, this is once a week. I have done it for 8-9 months now, every single week. I wake up at 4 a.m. The first thing I do is I go a run. I hate running, never been a good runner, don't like it. It's cold outside, especially at 4:15 in the morning, the middle of December, January. But you know why I do it? To get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I've even noticed in these past 8-9 months, my confidence shoot up, because every single time I tell myself I'm going to do a high performance day, I get up and I do it. So another thing I do in my high performance day, I get up, I go this run. It's a short run. It's a cold one, but it's a short one. I'll go out, I'll run for 15 minutes, okay? And I'll really push myself. Especially towards the end. I'll come back in, I'll get straight to work. So I start my work most mornings around 6 in the morning, sometimes 7. That means I get to go home, I get an hour or two of deep work before I start work. What I aim to do is something that I really don't want to do. So see these tasks that you keep putting off, that's what I put in these high performance days. So that's a day for me to get uncomfortable. I do those once per week, but there's many other things that you can do to get uncomfortable and do it consistently. Now, in terms of becoming more confident, when you become more confident, it's pretty simply put that life just becomes more enjoyable. There's nothing worse than lacking confidence. I've experienced that. I experienced it throughout most of my life, especially when it came to physical exercise before I started going to the gym. I was never a physically strong person. I was always a very slim person. So I lacked confidence in that. Only did I gain confidence when I started to fulfill the promises I made to myself, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and start going to the gym consistently. And the results came. Which brings me nicely onto the next part, in the sense of creating undeniable proof of who you are. So I wanted to be this confident young guy that went to the gym all the time. And do you know how I done that? I went to the gym all the time. I created undeniable proof. You could look at me and you could say that I went to the gym. There was results there. This is something, again, that David Goggins actually talks about, is creating this undeniable proof. If you want to be confident in who you are, you need to have proof to back that up. Let's say whatever you do for a job and somebody says, are you good at your job? And you're like, well, yeah, I'm not bad. If you want to be confident that you're good at something, create undeniable proof. Whatever you do, create undeniable proof, and that backs it up, and you'll be so confident with that on that one. Because what happens when we do that is, I've actually got a quote from Alex Hormozy here, says, your conviction must be stronger than their skepticism. And that comes when we create undeniable proof. When you have so much proof, everybody else's skepticism about what you are and who you are becomes invalid, because your conviction levels, which comes from your confidence, are just superior to that. One last thing as well that I'd like to touch on in terms of confidence is, throughout our life, you'll probably experience something where you have to stand up in front of people. You have to maybe talk to people. You have to do something you don't want to do. And a quote that my dad always used to say when I was younger, especially when I was in school, was fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Now, when it comes to confidence, you'll lack it whenever you don't prepare. I believe Benjamin Franklin actually said that quote, but it was like, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. It's pretty similar to that. But essentially, anything you're doing in your life, you need to be 100% prepared for it. For example, when I come in and do this podcast, if I don't know what I'm going to talk about, I come in, I start waffling, I won't be confident. Whereas if I come in with a clear plan and a clear purpose, a clear something to talk about, I'm going to be far more confident in conveying my points to you. So next time you go to do something, make sure you're prepared, because when you fail to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So a really good one from there. Now, a couple of things that you can do, you can take away from this episode and take action on when it comes to both fat loss and improving your self-confidence, I will give for you just now. So I mentioned in the last episode about non-negotiables. Make sure that whatever you're trying to get better at is part of those non-negotiables, in the sense that if you're trying to become more confident, maybe getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, do something that makes you uncomfortable. It could be once a day. That could be quite a lot for some people. It could be once a week. Like, for example, my high performance days. Make it something that you do regularly, because to become confident, we need to do these things regularly to be 100% confident all the time. Now, another thing that I would like you to start practicing, if you don't do this, this is something I constantly try to practice, is actually do what you say you're going to do. Because it's so easy to get tied up in our impulsive decisions. Like, for example, I have it all the time with people in the gym. They'll come into the gym and they'll be talking to each other. Maybe it's 7 or 8 o'clock at night and they're talking about something. Oh, why don't we go run tomorrow at 6 in the morning? Like, yeah, let's do it. They feel so motivated because it's an impulsive decision. is based on their emotions at the time. They decide they're going to get up at 6 in the morning. They actually wake up at 5:30 to go out at 6 in the morning. They think, fuck this, I'm away back to bed. Okay. And that comes from that lack of confidence because they made an impulse decision the night before. So before you commit to doing something, make sure it's not an impulsive decision. That's something I practice very regularly, and I hope you do too. You really will start to notice a difference. The last one I'm going to leave you with is start to stockpile results. Whatever you want to become more confident with, start to create those results and stockpile them. So when somebody confronts you, or if you feel confronted with somebody about talking about your confidence or what you do, you have the results there. You have the conviction that outweighs their skepticism. So yeah, whatever you're doing, make sure you're getting results behind you. To finish off today's podcast, I'm going to leave you with a quote that ties in pretty nicely with something I've spoke about already. This quote is from a guy called Seneca. Seneca lived again a long time ago, as the same person from the quote in our first episode did, over 2,000 years ago. He was a Stoic philosopher. This quote is a very popular quote. And he says, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Now, what that means is when people talk about good luck and they say, oh, so-and-so's so lucky, this person's so lucky, luck only occurs when we are prepared. So when you are matched with an opportunity, if you're not prepared to take that, you're not going to become lucky. Think back to any time you become lucky. The vast majority of the times you are prepared somewhat. Whether you know it or not, you are prepared for it. So I hope you take that quote into whatever it is in life. I hope you take something that you've learned from this podcast, you apply it, whether that's with the fat loss, whether that's with your own self-confidence. I really do hope it helps. As I say every episode, I'm so grateful for you listening. There's nothing more valuable than your time. So thank you for spending some of it with me. I ask one thing of you if you enjoyed this episode, if you want to repay me for whatever reason, I ask that you take one thing from this episode, you apply it to your life, and you pursue constant improvement. Thank you for listening.